10 Most Dangerous Prison Inmates. Get ready to enter the dark and twisted world of the most dangerous prison inmates. These are the individuals whose names send shivers down the spines of even the most hardened criminals. They've committed such awful and brutal crimes that they've been imprisoned for life, and for good reason. But what happens when you gather all of these notorious criminals in one place? Let's look at the horrifying stories of the 10 most dangerous prisoners in history. Let's delve into their twisted minds, heinous crimes, and the terrible details of their imprisonment. From cold-blooded killers to ruthless gang leaders, this list is not for the faint of heart. So buckle up for a crazy voyage through the darkest reaches of the prison system. Number 1. Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy was the epitome of evil. He preyed on young women and girls with his good looks and charisma, getting them into his car before violently abusing them. His acts were horrific, as he frequently raped and tortured his victims before killing them. Despite his charm, Bundy was a monster who wreaked havoc across the United States in the 1970s. He was eventually captured and convicted of many murders, but he proclaimed his innocence until the very end. He even attempted to escape from prison twice, proving that he would go to any length to avoid justice. Bundy was electrocuted to death in 1989, bringing an end to one of the most notorious and horrifying killing sprees in America. Number 2. Charles Manson. Charles Manson was a notorious cult leader who orchestrated a series of brutal murders in the 1960s. The man persuaded his followers, known as the Manson family, to carry out the murders in order to spark a race war. Manson's acts were horrible, and the world was appalled by the cruelty of his followers. He was arrested and convicted of numerous counts of murder, conspiracy, and other offenses. Manson was sentenced to death at first, but after the California government repealed the death penalty, his sentence was commuted to life in prison. He spent the remainder of his life in prison, becoming one of America's most renowned and infamous convicts. Number 3. Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer was a serial killer and cannibal from the United States, who murdered at least 17 young men and boys in the 1980s. He was notorious for his heinous actions, including dismembering and eating parts of his victims. Dahmer's crimes were shocking and disturbing, leaving a lasting impact on the world. Dahmer was eventually arrested and convicted of his crimes, and he received a life term in jail. His life, however, was cut short when he was battered to death by another convict in 1994. The crimes committed by Dahmer continue to fascinate and horrify people all over the world. His case is remembered as one of the most prominent cases of serial murdering and cannibalism in the contemporary history. Number 4. John Wayne Gacy. He was a serial killer and rapist from the United States who murdered at least 33 adolescent boys and young men in the 1970s. He was known for dressing up as a clown and entertaining children at neighborhood gatherings, concealing his true character beneath a normality mask. Gacy's acts were especially terrible in that he would lure his victims into his home under the pretense of offering employment or money, only to viciously abuse and kill them. After his capture, police discovered the remains of his victims buried throughout his property, sparking a nationwide outcry. Gacy was sentenced to death by lethal injection in 1994, after spending years on death row and mounting multiple appeals. His case is now remembered as one of the most horrifying examples of serial homicide in American history. Number 5. Richard Ramirez. Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, was a true nightmare come to life. With his devilish looks and penchant for violence, he prowled the streets of California during the 1980s, leaving a trail of terror and death in his wake. Ramirez's crimes were particularly heinous, as he would break into homes, rape and murder his victims, often leaving behind disturbing symbols and messages. His acts of violence were so horrific that they left the entire state in a state of shock and fear. Despite his arrest and conviction, Ramirez remained a frightening figure in the public imagination, with his warped personality and heinous deeds captivating people all over the world. His death in 2013 marked the end of one of America's most iconic and horrifying killing sprees, but his legacy as a true personification of evil will live on for future generations. Number 6. Charles Albright. The eyeball killer, Charles Albright, was a real-life boogeyman that haunted the streets of Texas in the early 1990s. He earned his chilling nickname by gouging out the eyeballs of his victims, leaving a trail of death and destruction in his wake. Albright escaped investigation for years despite his horrible murders, making him one of the most elusive and terrifying serial killers in American history. His reign of terror did not end until he was ultimately captured and convicted of the murders of 3 women. The eyeball killer case became a media sensation, with reporters and true crime fans alike trying to piece together the facts of Albright's horrific murders. Number 7. Andrei Chikatilo. The Red Ripper, also known as Andrei Chikatilo, was a Soviet serial killer who terrorized Russia during the 1980s. The real-life monster came straight out of monster movies who prowled the countryside of Russia, stalking and killing women and children in the most gruesome ways imaginable. His victims were left mutilated and dismembered, earning him his chilling nickname. Despite a large manhunt and years of investigation, Chikatilo escaped for years, becoming one of the most known and feared serial killers of all time. When he was finally discovered, the stunning breadth of his crimes shocked Russia and the rest of the globe. Chikatilo's trial became a media phenomenon as the grisly facts of his killings were made public. He was eventually convicted of 52 killings and sentenced to death, effectively ending his reign of terror. The Red Ripper case is still one of the most unsettling and disturbing examples of serial killing in history. Number 8. Eileen Wuornos. The female serial killer who gained notoriety in the late 1980s and early 1990s for her brutal murders of men in Florida. Wuornos was an unstable person who had a difficult upbringing and relied on sex trade to survive. She gradually began to regard her clients as predators and began murdering them in cold blood. Her victims were usually middle-aged males who she accused of raping or assaulting her. Wuornos was later captured and convicted of 6 killings, but she claimed she was acting in self-defense. She was sentenced to death and executed by lethal injection in 2002, despite multiple appeals. The case of Eileen Wuornos continues to fascinate and horrify people around the world, as it offers a rare glimpse into the mind of a female serial killer. Her story is a tragic one, as she was clearly a victim of abuse and neglect throughout her life, but her violent actions cannot be justified. Number 9. Thomas Silverstein. Thomas Silverstein was a notorious inmate who spent more than 35 years in solitary confinement, earning him the title of the most dangerous prisoner in America. He was imprisoned for armed robbery in the 1970s and went on to commit multiple murders while inside the prison. Silverstein was notorious for his excessive aggression, and he was involved in numerous jail riots and murders. He was eventually placed in solitary prison, where he remained until his death in 2019. Silverstein sparked great debate since some believed he had been unfairly punished for his actions, while others considered him as a dangerous and irredeemable criminal. Number 10. Dennis Rader. Dennis Rader, dubbed the BTK Killer, was an infamous American serial killer who terrorized Wichita, Kansas for over 3 decades. During his crime spree, he was recognized for his signature method of binding, torturing, and killing his victims, and he sent taunting letters to police and local media. Rader's reign of terror ended in 2005, when he was apprehended and confessed to 10 murders between 1974 and 1991. He received 10 consecutive life sentences with no hope of parole. Rader is currently serving his sentence in Kansas's El Dorado Correctional Facility, where he's separated from other inmates for his own safety. His atrocities shocked and appalled the Wichita community, and his families have suffered long-term consequences. These 10 most dangerous prison inmates are the stuff of nightmares. Their gruesome crimes have left a trail of devastation and heartbreak in their wake. While these criminals are now punished or locked up, we can't turn away from their stories. Let us honor the memory of their victims by standing up against crime and doing our part to create a safer world. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more shell-shocking and fascinating stories.